So we will go ahead and get started. It's an honor also to introduce our next two speakers, our current president, Adam Schwannard from Oregon State University, and our past president and BioTAP original PI, Beth Schuessler at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Caleb, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Those are very official sounding titles, and in turn, we have a very official presidential address here. And we're going to get into some of the history and some of the future of BioTAP as well. And I'm going to just get us started here, and then I'm going to pass it off to my colleague and co-conspirator and co-presenter, Beth Schuessler, who many of you know. And so what do we actually want to cover here in this kind of meta talk about BioTAP itself in this moment at our annual conference? First, we want to talk about who we are, and by we, of course, we mean BioTAP, but provide a little bit of historical context for how we got here, because we're going to be talking quite a bit today about where we're going to be going and how we want to be navigating the future as well. So along those lines, we're in, not to steal our own thunder here, but we're in a little bit of a kind of post-transitional moment where BioTAP had federal funding to establish this research coordination network. That is how BioTAP came to be. And there was a question of what does that look like in a post-funding era? And so a lot of work has gone into answering that question, and we want to update the community on that, on those answers. So that is to say, we want to talk a little bit about how BioTAP is going to be structured going forward, and how the community is going to self-govern. And then we have some very big and exciting news to share, in that we are going to be hosting the first ever set of our annual elections to sort of reinvigorate the leadership and bring us into sort of compliance with the bylaws that we're going to be talking a little bit about for this next generation of BioTAP. And then we'll leave some time for discussion and some questions at the end. All right. So first, Beth doesn't even know that I'm going to do this and hasn't seen this slide, but I want to just start with an extra set of props. We're going to be kind of giving some shout outs to many of the people all around the country who have been incredible collaborators with BioTAP over the years and have helped shape this vision of the future. But we would be remiss not to address sort of the original PIs on the BioTAP Research Coordination Network grant that, again, got us where we are. So just a huge shout out right in the beginning to Beth and Grant and Gilly and Chris and Judy, and many, many thanks. I speak for myself and I think many of my colleagues to say that we personally and professionally as a community have benefited immensely from BioTAP. And so want to give a shout out to them. And now, having embarrassed Beth, I'm going to pass it over. And I think I'll be able to anticipate when you're going to change, but if you just need to give me I'll just click forward.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Adam. And most people know that I'm relatively shameless, and so I actually had a note to make sure to call out the original PIs as well. So thank you for doing that. Actually, I'm also going to start a timer for myself, and Adam, flag me down when I've gone too long. So here I am. I'm really excited. I am the ghost of BioTAP Past right now. That will be this section of the talk. It is really a moment to sit back and reflect on where BioTAP has been, and then as a way to kind of think about where it's going to go into the future. It is 10 years since BioTAP started. It started off, as many of you know, with the research coordination networks, which I'll explain in a second. Those can start off as an incubator proposal, which is a smaller kind of pot of funding to kind of start a network. And that was the way that this actually kicked off in 2013. I was the sole PI on that. And honestly, and this might resonate with a bunch of you, is that I wrote that grant because I was doing TA professional development here at the University of Tennessee, feeling very alone, feeling very lost, not really knowing who to reach out to, where the resources were. And I read about these grants, and these grants are specifically to bring together people who are doing work in isolation, knowing that when you bring people together, that they can do better things together. It was to form a network about something that would be better if you could bring people together to do it. And that's why I wrote this grant, because I felt like I needed help and I needed to bring together people. And so it started off as this network of individuals who were working with biology. It was specific to biology. It still is for the most most part, although I think we're open to all science disciplines. But biology teaching assistant, teaching professional development, which we tend to call TA, TPD, or variations of that. You'll see that abbreviation throughout. And so a lot of people see BioTAP and they think, oh, this is a network for graduate students. And kind of, it's certainly to support graduate student teaching, but it's really focused squarely on the practitioners, which are the people who are delivering the TA professional development, either helping them specifically or bringing to bear resources from the larger communities, such as research that folks like Erin does and Emma to bring to bear on the practice. And when this grant started, it was actually solely focused, and this kind of makes me laugh. It was solely focused on, okay, we're going to put together the best practices. We're going to be able to tell everybody this is how we should do TA TPD. And if you sit back and think about that, that was always pretty laughable. And next slide, and then I'll talk about why. So in 2015 was when the larger grant got started, which was a 5-year kind of big boy, as we call it, the RC and UBE, the larger pot of funding. By that point, we had gotten enough people together who had laughed at me and said, oh, Beth, so sweet, so cute. There is no one way to do TPD, and there are no best practices because the context is so different everywhere. And really, we also need a lot more empirical data to tell us how to do things. And so when it came about, and when the 5 PIs that Adam had showed you all came together to write this grant, we realized that we needed to focus it on helping to raise the ability for people to do research on their TPD programs so that they could collect the empirical data to inform their practices. And so we basically had 3 main kind of foci for this grant. It was to foster collaborative research through the BioTAP Scholars Program, which I'll talk about in a second here. Just generally expanding and supporting collaborations across all aspects of TA, teaching professional development, and then specifically trying to synthesize the work that the BioTAP scholars were doing, synthesize work that the PIs were doing to bring together, to disseminate, and to advocate for best practices, quote unquote, in TA TPD. So I'm going to go through those 3 things a little bit here. So the next slide, I think, is on the BioTAP scholars. So we started the grant in 2015. It took us a while to kind of sort through how we were going to run this this kind of signature program, what I think of as the signature program of BioTAP, which was the BioTAP Scholars Program. It started in 2017. We had a cohort of BioTAP scholars. They were usually anywhere from 16 to 18 folks in each cohort, and we had cohorts in 2017, 2018, 2019, and on the right you can see the lucky 2020 cohort, which was the one that got to do everything virtually and got to, of course, was not ideal, but we called this the most sanitized of our cohorts. So it was a year-long professional development program, and the way it worked was that there were 2 kind of virtual meetings that we had on Zoom. One was synchronous, one was asynchronous, to kind of get ourselves all geared up. And then we met for 2 days in person. And I think the last 3 we met at Ohio State. Sorry, the last 2 we met at Ohio State, and then the 4th on Zoom. And the idea was that people joined into the program to propose and then to enact a research project on their TA, teaching professional development program. And the 2-day workshop was to generate the plan for how the research was going to be enacted. And so it was just a lot of brainstorming, coming up with an idea, peer feedback, just in kind of in situ, in place. And then there were 4 follow-up sessions that were all virtual, in small, usually four folks in a pod, working together to support each other in their enactment of the program. So we had 66 total folks that went through the BioTAP Scholars Program, which was amazing, and we got a real chance to kind of refine the model of how we did that. And I'll show you, there is a paper for those that are interested in that model. We did publish the model so that everybody can have access to it. So that was BioTAP Scholars. The other part of our project, the next slide, I think, Adam, is just once again to think about how this worked to get to our goals, right? As we wanted to build capacity in folks to be able to do research. And on the left, I don't expect you to read this, but I just want to show that we did do a whole bunch of work collecting outcomes data. And Gilly worked really, really hard on this part, was to collect information to show that indeed, yes, our BioTAP scholars really did learn a lot about research generally, about specific things about research, about how to access the literature, about how to ask the right questions, about the types of methods that they might use to actually do research in this area. But the thing that was really surprising to us, and I think also that was really for me, I think the most wonderful thing about the project was that 98% of the BioTAP scholars that we surveyed said that they had personal or professional gains from this program. There were a lot of folks that talked about the advancement that they got professionally from doing this, and that it increased dialogue about teaching professional development for graduate students at their institution. And this quote was from a participant that said, BioTAP was a catalyst, in my opinion, for how TPD is now implemented at our institution. The reason has everything to do with the fact that being a BioTAP scholar gave me a credibility that I did not have previously. And so this value of a network, once again, of when you're working in isolation, that you have a hard time advancing the stuff you want to do. But if you work in a network, and if you're all pushing together, you can get greater benefit for the work that you do. And that's the real value of BioTAP. All right, next slide. So one of the second goal was to expand and support collaborations. The left is just a screenshot grab of what at one time, and it would look wildly different. And I actually think Adam and I need to work on this, is to drop a map showing all of the members of BioTAP and where they are. This was like basically in year 3 of BioTAP. And so at that time, we were just amazed, you know, at all the people that came from all over the US and Canada. We're now worldwide. And so we did grab a whole bunch of people to come together. And then once again, all kudos to Gilly for working really hard on also looking at how contacts among, in this case, the BioTAP scholars, this was cohorts 1, 2, and 3, and how their connections with each other. So each of these little circles is an individual, and each of those lines is a connection between an individual, and how how the growth of the network fostered discussion, in this case about TPD, before BioTAP scholars on the left and after BioTAP scholars on the right. And so this amazing growth and just people that we have to talk to about the work that we do. The next slide. And then the research and dissemination piece, our BioTAP scholars, and this actually, once again, this is old data, right? These were data that we grabbed at the end of the project in 2021. I believe that there have been more publications from BioTAP scholars since then, but at that time, 2 of our BioTAP scholars had published their work. There were 14 presentations of those BioTAP scholar research projects, and 78% of them indicated that they were planning to continue to do research on their programs. And then for us, the PI team, we published 4 different publications that are all shown here. And we had 12 conference presentations. And all of this work inspired by us working together on this project and then putting information out that we thought would be useful to the community. Grant Gardner has a database of TA-TPD literature that's aligned with the Reeves framework, which is shown on the top right of the little cluster, the conceptual framework for graduate teaching assistant. It talks about the different outcomes that you can assess when you're doing research on your TPD programs. And he has literature that's aligned with each of those different outcomes, and can show you where there are a lot of gaps in the literature on things like student outcomes, for example, which is really, really hard to do research on. All right, so those were like our 3 main kind of for each of those different goals. And then overall, the findings, the next slide. Overall, we found that we really did bring together a whole bunch of people. At the time that we closed out the network, we had 250 members. We consider a member to be anyone on our listserv. But today, I went into the Google group today or yesterday, and we have 376 people on the Google group for BioTAP, which kind of blows my mind. So 376 individuals who were working in isolation, who are now unified by being a member in this network. We have tons of resources on TA-TPD, papers, ways, methodology. Please check out, if you haven't, go to biotap.org and look at the website, because all of those resources are still there. One of those resources, for example, is a position statement on TA-TPD. It is something on why it's so important. You can download that and you can give it to your administrators and see if you can convince them about the value of doing this type of work. And the virtual conference, here we are today. The virtual conference was never a part of our original plans for this network. It was something that we first created in 2018 because we wanted to have a venue for our BioTAP scholars to disseminate their work and invite the community to also disseminate their work. This is our 5th of these conferences. They are incredibly important to the network, and they have been an amazing kind of foundational thing that sometimes things come out of grant projects that you never knew were going to be as important, and this is one of those. And so overall, professional advancement and recognition. And I just want to emphasize that we really did meet what I felt was the need that the BioTAP network had first been established. And over on the left, I just want to say that what we took to calling ourselves in 2021, which I still think we should call ourselves today, which is we are the premier national network for professional development and advocacy of TPD practitioners and improvement of TPD practices. That is our value niche, as Dan Johnson would say. All right, next slide. So in spring 2021, our funding was winding down, and we had this question, okay, now what? Like, once the funding's gone, what do you do with the network? What's going to happen? And so we asked ourselves, what is BioTAP going to look like post-grant funding? Who gets to decide? How is this work going to be sustained? And who's going to sustain it? The PIs are tired at this point. They've been carrying around the BioTAP, kind of luggage for a while. So who are we going to pass this off to? And so we started a process of a sustainability task force. So the next slide we can move to. The sustainability task force was, once again, an unintended thing. We didn't know we were going to do this. It was, I would say, one of the best things that we did. If anybody has a grant and they're wondering how to keep it going after funding, create a sustainability task force. We invited the network to help us. It was 19 members, 3 groups. We intentionally pulled back the PIs from this. We did not want to be involved in deciding what the future was going to be. We passed off 3 ideas to these 19 members. We said, we want you to generate ideas to sustain the vision of BioTAP, but without funding. And you don't have to do it the same way that we have done it, right? Do it different, please. Whatever you want to do. Interrogate the affordances and the challenges of what we've been doing, and then give us a list of recommendations. How should we move forward in the future? All right, next slide. We had 3 different groups, as I said, that were focused on the 3 main kind of areas of BioTAP. One was the BioTAP Scholars subgroup. You can see here the participants and the leader, but they recommended that, and this is so funny to me, it's very full circle, right? Is we started off in 2013 saying we need to focus on TA-TPD practices. And then we went into research on TA-TPD practices, and we are coming all the way back. And this is where it should be, right? Is focusing on TA-TPD practices and bringing people together in regional groups so that they have better access, that it's more affordable, that we get teams together instead of individuals, and that they have continuous connection and feedback. And indeed, this group went on to write the grant that has already been referenced, Evolving the Culture of Biology. Sometimes by mistake, I say Evolving the Cult of Biology, and that's just wrong. So just remember it's culture. So ECB is an outgrowth of this sustainability group, and I couldn't be more happy about that. The next group, if we keep going here, was our virtual conference subgroup, which we are here today because of this group and their work. They wanted to make sure to keep the conference management very simple, to foster networking. We've always been really kind of hopefully using the network or the conference as a way to continue networking, to continue bringing people together. And then our dream one day is to have an in-person conference. We still have to figure out how to pull that off. But one day there will be a face-to-face BioTAP conference, we hope and dream. And then the last group was the networking subgroup. And they were the ones that really pushed us to think about governance. They said, you know, to move forward, it can't just be flailing around. You actually have to sit around and you have to think about really hard your leadership, your structure, your mission, your goals. Where's your base of operations? They talked about, do we want to be a special interest group within a society, or do we want to be our own thing? And that we need to form a governance group. And they were right. And so we did that. And so the next slide is that after our sustainability task force came together and gave us the recommendations, the funding closed out. And we created this governance task force. These were 7 folks who were literally tasked with the challenge of defining the governance structure for the new BioTAP, or what we refer to as BioTAP Next Gen. We have all sorts of ways. There's BioTAP 1.0 is the original, and then 2.0. Sometimes I refer to this as BioTAP 3.0, but we probably should stop with that. But BioTAP Next Gen. These folks were all on the governance task force. We took about a year-ish to work together. And at this point, I'm going to pass off to Adam, who is going to go through all of the work that this group did, which was amazing. And I couldn't thank these members more.
Great, yeah, and thank you, Beth, as well. And I think just to sort of segue here, in this time of uncertainty, and as Beth pointed out, this grew out of the networking subgroup of the Sustainability Task Force. In this time of uncertainty, it seemed like the thing we needed to do is band together a little bit more tightly and maybe formalize some aspects of the network. So over that basically year of the governance task force working on this, the culminating product of that are sort of a formal establishment of the organization and the creation of bylaws that were ratified by a transitional executive committee in September of 2022. So the bylaws are up on biotap.org/governance. You can read the whole thing. If this is the kind of thing you like to geek out on, you can see in bold there the major sections of that. Obviously, we don't want to go through line by line in this, but we did want to hit a couple highlights, give sort of the short pitch version of how we envision BioTAP functioning in the future, starting with the formal goals that we stated right at the outset of this document. So here it is, Article 2, the Biology Teaching Assistant Project, BioTAP, works at the interface of research and practice to inform the teaching professional development, or TPD, of graduate and undergraduate teaching assistants, TAs, in higher education. So we do want to be mindful of the fact that TAs look like different things in different kinds of institutions. The vision of BioTAP is for all institutions to provide sufficient and effective TPD to TAs so that they can in turn deliver the most effective, inclusive, and evidence-based teaching and learning environment possible for their students. One of the things that I personally think is just such a compelling sell for the value of TA TPD is you're helping so many people in so many different ways all at once. You're supporting TAs in their role as employees of your university in the moment when they need support as employees. You're also supporting their future professional development, all while hopefully increasing the quality of undergraduate education in the class sections that those TAs are teaching, right? So specifically, we lay out sort of 5 explicit goals for the BioTAP organization. And some of this is a little bit redundant because Beth provided that historical context, but this is what we envision as the big priorities moving forward. Let me see here. Establish a national network of TA-TPD stakeholders for the purposes of communication and collaboration. Provide resources to improve institutional TA-TPD program offerings and assessment. Facilitate new empirical research on effective and inclusive TA-TPD practices. Organizing an annual conference to disseminate TA-TPD research and insights, and catalyzing the adoption of effective, inclusive, and evidence-based TA-TPD practices. So again, with the coming full circle, where we really envision a big role of BioTAP in the future is to help advocate for this vision of effective and inclusive TA-TPD. So in terms of what that looks like in practice, well, we have a network and we have those 376 and counting members. And so if you're seeing this and learning about us for the first time, go ahead and join that Google group if this is something that you consider yourself a stakeholder in. And you can find out how to do that at biotap.org/contact. In terms of the resources, Beth hit on this as well. We have quite a bit of information already available online. We're also thinking in terms of the future of ways to continue to improve that and make it even more helpful. The facilitating the new empirical research, this was obviously a big part of the sort of earlier grant that we heard about, and one of the motivations for the conference itself. We also have an education committee that I'm going to talk about in a second here, where they've done some workshops in the past to help sort of not only with the research piece, but with some TATPD practice as well. So that's another outlet that we can continue to be working on to help foster good, high quality research on TATPD. And then the annual conference. Well, hey, look at us. Here we are. We did it. We can check one off. And in fact, what is this? The 5th conference, I think, at this point. And so you can see biotap.org for past talks. Actually, anytime we get permission from presenters to record those, we can do that and post them up online. There's a lot of really great talks on TPD up there and other information about our conferences. And then this really big one, the catalyze the adoption of effective, inclusive, evidence-based TATPD. There's lots to do here. And this is, again, a big purpose of BioTAP going forward. So the education committee certainly has a big role to play here and has done some great things. And as Beth pointed to, an outgrowth of BioTAP that we consider sort of one of the programs of the BioTAP ecosystem is that Evolving the Culture of Biology program. And this is the major focus of that work, is to really try to catalyze the adoption and dissemination of good TATPD. And actually going to be talking about that a little bit more tomorrow as well, for those of you who can make that talk. And so there we go. In terms of other aspects of the bylaws, again, we didn't really want to get bogged down in sort of the weeds of the governance, but we thought we'd pull out a couple just really important takeaways. One of them is, well, who's a member? And Beth actually already hit on this as well. Right now, we're considering anybody in the Google group a member of BioTAP. And there are no dues associated with that. We really wanted to be mindful to make the barriers to being a member of this network as minimal as possible. We also just, we go out of our way to make this clear in the bylaws, but it's important to do this now as well. All individuals, all institutions, all identities are welcome here. One of the things I say as a sort of beneficiary of that BioTAP RCN, and as a member of cohort 1 of the BioTAP scholars, one of the things that drew me to this network was, one, I'm a practitioner of TATPD, and obviously there's a lot that BioTAP has to offer there, but also these are really, really great people. They're some of my absolute favorite colleagues. They're the education-minded kinds of colleagues. And so it really is a welcoming, inclusive group of people. And if you want to join that, go ahead and check out that /contact page on the website. What are the perks of membership? We think that there's many, and Beth spoke to this as well. The power in solidarity, and having a bigger membership allows us to advocate even more compellingly in the times that we want to do that, and the ways that we can do that. There's a couple practical perks, right? You can actually communicate. You can use that network to share ideas, to ask questions, to keep conversations rolling about TATPD. You can attend that conference. You can participate in BioTAP programming. Those things are not restricted only to members, but obviously you can participate in them as well. And one thing that we do want you to be a member for, in order to take advantage of, is that as a member, you're able to actually participate in the leadership of the organization. You can take part in the governance. You can serve as an officer on one of the committees that I'm going to talk about coming right up. And you can actually also help envision future directions for leadership by proposing amendments to the bylaws and literally helping us lead this network. So in terms of some of the nitty-gritty here of how BioTAP has been structured going forward, it really is sort of a bottom-up kind of approach that we've taken, in that there are 3 standing committees that are sort of always in operation. We have our networking committee, our education committee, and our conference committee. And these do tasks that sound like they should be doing, right? The networking committee is responsible for enhancing communication and collaboration among the network. In practice, they're maintaining that listserv, they're maintaining the website, and they're also trying to think about ways to continue to foster growth and reach of the network as well. The education committee has also some very special charges. They're there to sort of advocate for the value of TATPD and to provide resources and support for both research and practice, as those being sort of parallel goals of the network. And they're there to, for both research and practice, help to disseminate effective practices. Conference committee has some narrower duties and scope, but they're very, very essential. And that is to plan and run our annual BioTAP conference. And so major shout out to them for all the hard work that's gone into putting today and tomorrow on for this year's conference. And then the committees are sort of the foundation of the leadership and of the work, but then there's an executive committee that's there to sort of integrate the work that those committees are doing and really focus a little bit more holistically on the governance. So we have an executive committee comprised of 7 officers. 3 of those officers are going to be the chairs that will be appointed by the members of each of the committees. So they'll appoint their own leader to serve on the executive committee. And then we have a few sort of other officer positions that serve in that executive committee role. 3 presidents that will serve 3-year terms, and they sort of move through these different slightly different roles over the course of those 3 years. You start as a president-elect. In your 2nd year, you move on to being kind of the acting president. And in your 3rd year, you can serve as the past president. And then we also have a treasurer, which as of right now is a position that isn't actually currently filled. So hold that thought. Our executive committee, as it seems, should be the case, right? It serves as the chief governing body of BioTAP, sort of oversees the work of all of those committees. We're running this via an adapted dynamic governance where the goal is to come to proper consensus and figure out how the executive committee wants to move forward with a unified front. And those couple of specific roles, right? The acting president is sort of kind of the primary caretaker in your 2nd year serving as the president. You're presiding over executive committee meetings, coordinating the work that the standing committees are doing, ensuring kind of proper procedures and compliance with the bylaws. Past president also has a very important role. They're there in their 3rd year as president to provide historical context, some guidance, advice. They also have the special role of overseeing the elections process that we're going to be talking about here in a moment. And the president-elect is the 1st year president, and so they're going to be doing some onboarding. They're offering a fresh perspective, and they're also going to be helping with some of the administrative stuff in that 1st year, like taking minutes of our executive committee meetings, helping to curate documents and governance organization and stuff. And the treasurer, again, this doesn't actually currently exist, but we envision this ultimately being sort of a chief fiscal officer. As of right now, this immediate, the year that is to follow, we envision sort of an adapted role of this being someone to help us continue to work on, because a lot of work has gone into this already, but continue working on exploring sort of future legal and financial directions of BioTAP, the organization. And then last comment here before we come to a close here, Beth is going to round it out for us. How is it going to work in terms of bringing in leaders and establishing leadership? And we made it simple for ourselves. We're going to consider an administrative term, the calendar year, so starting in January, ending in December, as years do. And so we want to think a little bit about how that's all going to work. So if we have the start of our year, we're going to actually start at the end here. We have a little bit of a buffer window that we want to ensure exists so that people can have like the last month of the year basically to do all the other things they need to do and have some time for transitioning of the leadership of BioTAP. And then preceding that, we have a time for nominations of officers. Anybody who wants to nominate themselves or a colleague can throw those names into a hat to be considered as an officer. So we consider officers as anybody serving on those committees and or the executive committee positions that don't serve on those standing committees. And then we'll have sort of a call for nominations that must be at least a couple weeks, and then a time for some voting for those individuals to serve in those officer positions, also of 2 weeks. So in practice, while the executive committee and the past president will coordinate to carry out the exact logistics, generally we'll have sort of elections happening in November with time for December to sort of transition in and get all those other things done that we need to be doing in our lives. And then, of course, at the start of a next term, we need to think about the committee governance itself. And so the committees have no more than 30 days to appoint a chair to represent them on that executive committee. So this is sort of the life cycle of BioTAP that we envision going forward. And you may note it is the very end of October. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Beth. And she just has a couple more points to make here about an exciting time in BioTAP history as we transition through this kind of little bit of uncertainty to trying to get into full compliance kind of with the bylaws and the structure of BioTAP that we envision moving forward. Take it away, Beth.
I am now the ghost of BioTAP Future. So really, it is, as Adam said, it is a really exciting time. And it's a time that we have been working toward for 2 years now. If you start to think about, the Sustainability Task Force in 2021 and all the work that the Governance Task Force did, we are now at a point where we can officially launch all of this into this January. Essentially is where we say, okay, now we start this new thing, BioTAP 3.0, next gen, whatever, we want to call it. This is where it all begins. But to make that happen, we need to get these elections off the ground. And so I'm here to tell you about those. So you can flip to the next slide, Adam. As Adam very, very, I think, explained very well, we have a bunch of officers that are a part of this new BioTAP. And so officers include the committee members on those 3 standing committees. And then we also have the president-elect, the acting president, the past president, and the treasurer. And then we'll have those 3 representatives of each committee on the executive committee. We have some openings right now, and so we need to fill this. So primarily, number one, Adam and I would very much like a president-elect to come on board. That will make us the trio that runs the organization. So Adam will continue to be the acting president next year. I will continue to be the past president next year, and somebody else will become the president-elect. That will make them, in whatever year that will be, 2024 president-elect, and then 2025 they will become acting president, and I will roll off this leadership kind of trio. And so you would rotate through this sort of leadership team. We do need a treasurer. Now, as mentioned, we have no money, so you don't have to have any financial acuity in terms of figuring out the books or anything like that. But what we really do need is we need somebody to work with the executive committee to really help us think through, are we going to start collecting money? If we do that, where does one hold the money? What does this mean for the type of organization we need to be? Are we going to have to start filling out paperwork to be an LLC, a nonprofit? We have talked about this a lot. So you're not starting from scratch. It is a matter of having somebody kind of take the lead on that kind of thinking through how we're going to move forward on this idea of the organization having funding. And then committee members. So the committee members are part of the officers of the organization. Right now, we do have committees for each of our 3 standing committees. Right now, though, everybody's just there and they don't really have terms of membership or anything like that. It's just an amorphous group of happy people working together. What we need is we need to start officially getting people onto rotations. So that typically you would be 3 years on a committee. At this point, you'll see when you get the nomination form, which I'm going to put into the chat box, we're going to be looking for people to sign on to be a 1-year appointment on for example, the education committee, or a 1-year appointment on the networking committee, or a 2-year appointment, or a 3-year appointment, so we can start staggering our terms a little bit. You can go and be on those committees over and over again. You can put your name in the hat and you can serve multiple terms. So if you're currently on it and you put your name in for a 1-year term and you really like it, you can then put your name in for an additional term later on. So these are the positions that you will see on the form when I send that out. So let me go into some of the details of the process of elections. Any BioTAP member can be nominated. You do have to be on the Google group to be nominated on this form. Once again, that's 367 of us. The person that you nominate, if you're going to nominate somebody, also needs to be in the Google group. You can certainly self-nominate. For a lot of societies, that is exactly the way it works. And so don't feel shy about that if you want to serve. You can also nominate someone else. If you do that, I will reach out to that person to make sure that they actually want to be on the ballot. And so I will do that work. You can just turn in names of people that you think would be good in those positions. To nominate yourself or to nominate someone else, you will go to this Google form that I've just put into the chat. It's pretty simple. We're just asking for a name, title, institution, and then a 200 to 300 word statement of why you would like to be elected and the relevant experience that you would bring to bear in the position. And this is just, once again, so when we put the slate of candidates together and people are voting, they just have some information that they can read through and make selections from. Those nominations are going to be due at midnight Eastern time on November the 14th. And once again, that will be through this Google form. We will also be sending this out and all of this information through the Google group as well. And that gives us 2 weeks for nominations. All right, next slide. From there, following on what Adam told you, after that 2-week nomination period, we will then have a 2-week voting period. So the form for voting will actually go out. It will probably be through a Qualtrics. We will probably limit it to what will go out to individual links to the members of the Google group where you can vote one time and one time only and all that good stuff. You will have 2 weeks in which to do that voting. And then on December 1st, thereabouts, we will notify folks who have been elected for president-elect, for treasurer, and for the various committees. And then we will send an announcement out to the full group. So everybody should know in December the results of that election. And then all of those folks will start their service January 1st of 2024. So I'm stumbling every year because really still lost in those. And I think that is everything that we wanted to tell you all about. We have a little bit of time for questions now. We are happy to talk through any of this. We know it's a lot that we have been immersed in this for 2 years. It makes almost perfect sense to us. But we're sure that for a lot of people, this is really new. And Adam and I will also be around tomorrow at the spooky community discussion time period, 3:20 to 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, to talk about anything BioTAP, but also we can answer any elections questions that you all have, or governance, or the past. You have us here now or them. So thank y'all. I think, Adam, is there anything else?
No, that's it. And just time for questions and comments if you have them. And thanks so much for listening.
Great. Yes. Any questions for Beth or Adam? You can type them into the chat and I'm happy to read them. Or if you want to just raise your hand or it worked last time, we can just speak up if you do have something. I think that will be fine. For nominations, are there rules pertaining to position? I mean, can graduate students serve as members on committees, or is it faculty? Or
I don't think we have any rules for that, do we, Adam? No, if you're on the Google group, if you are a graduate student, that is fine. If you're a non-tenure track faculty member, tenure track faculty member, I guess we'll take administrators as well.
postdocs too.
Postdocs, yeah. Staff members should have said that as well. There's a lot of folks who enact TPD programs who are in staff positions, and obviously that is a big part of our network as well.
All right. Well, thank you both. Thank you for laying that out too. That was very well done. It's interesting to see it with how something that I mean, I just assume runs itself, but there's a lot of things that go on in the background for sure that keep us on task, which I think is really important. So we'll hit this again tomorrow in the social hour and community discussion. We'll bring back the links and nomination forms. And if questions come up between now and then, that's an opportunity to ask them, but definitely you can reach out to Adam and Beth as well if you have questions. So we are just a tad bit ahead of schedule, but next we have a break. So go grab a snack, walk around. We will be back in 25 minutes at 1:30. So that's 3:30 Eastern time, 2:30 Central, 1:30 Mountain, 12:30 Pacific. So we'll see you all back here in about 25 minutes. Thanks.